Thank you. Okay, I call this briefing meeting of the Board of Water Resources to order this morning on October 10th, 2024. It's just a bit after 8:30. And we are out at the, oh my goodness, I'm not going to get the official name right, so I'll ask Director Hassenegger to remind us exactly where we are.
Yes, we are at the Doris Eccles Wildlife Center.
Thank
Education
you.
Center.
Thank you for getting that formal name on the record for us, and it is a lovely place to be. We'll just get the briefing meeting going this morning. I guess I could do a quick chair's report before we do introductions. We had a great day yesterday out at our annual board tour, and we went to the Great Salt Lake yesterday for our annual board tour, and it was very educational and interesting and lovely, and just want to thank all of the staff and other folks who helped to arrange for that tour. We truly appreciate it. Let's go ahead and do introductions. I will note that board member Brian Steed has another engagement this morning that he is juggling. So my understanding is that he will be back and forth. He's not logged in yet, but we'll make sure that we watch out for him, and hopefully Shannon can make sure she gets on the record when he is with us. So I am Juliette Tennert. I represent Salt Lake and Tooele and have the great pleasure of chairing the board this year. And we'll go down to Dana to do the introductions of the board.
I'm Dana Van Horn with the Upper Colorado River.
Spencer Jones with the Lower Colorado River Basin.
Blaine Hipson, Severe River Basin.
Mike Davis, Provo River Drainage.
Charles Holmgren, Bear River Basin.
Kyle Stevens, Weber River Basin.
All right, thank you. And Director Hassenegger, can you introduce yourself and your staff?
Yes, good morning. Candace Hassenegger, Director at the Division of Water Resources. With us today, we have Joel Williams, Shalane DiBernardi, Marisa Egbert, Russell Hadley, Tom Cox, Bradley Caldwell, Ani Baynard, Ethan Stayner, Shannon Clowes taking minutes. Thank you, Shannon. And our awesome AV team, Paul Gedge and Seth Majors, who make it all happen. Thank you, guys.
All right, thank you very much. Well, let's go ahead and jump on into the agenda for today. We've got a pretty decent agenda. Starting off with the minutes, I don't know if everyone's had the chance to review. Is there anything we want to note now or have questions around now? No?
I thought the minutes looked really good.
Yep.
They seem to be modernized quite a bit,
Good.
Shannon.
Yeah. Thanks, Shannon.
So
She does a great job for us.
easy to go through.
All right. Very good. So Charles, I assume you'll plan to make the motion on that?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay. Right. Very good. And then we'll have we just have one feasibility report today. RE 482. This is in Kyle's area. Kyle, do you want to set this up for us at all, and then Ani can share details?
Yeah. As you, those of you that have opportunity to drive along the I-15 corridor will note that there's a lot of construction taking place on the Hillfield, the Roy exit, and I think all through that area. This particular project, again, is just part of that reconstruction of the I-15 and also the expansion of the 1800 North interchange in Sunset. That will be that is a part of that. And you'll note in our agenda that later on there's an application summary for Clinton City, which again is a part of that same area that's being impacted by all of these changes.
All right. Great. Thank you. Ani, good morning.
So Davis and Weber counties, canal companies coming to the board for financial assistance for the widening of 1800 North and Clinton. It's really similar to Tom's project from last year, the 2000 West widening. They're widening the road. I think it's going to be a 4-lane road with turn lanes. So, but the old 30-plus-year-old 12-inch pipe that's buried underneath the road right now is going to be relocated into the park strip. They're replacing the asphalt with a concrete roadway, so it makes more sense to move it out of that roadway and into the park strip for maintenance. It's also the current pipeline is buried only 2 feet deep, and UDOT requires it to be 4 feet deep. So just for all these reasons, they just think it's much smarter to move it out of the roadway and into the park strip. So that's the gist of the project. Any
Right.
questions?
Thank you. Questions? Seems like it's pretty straightforward. Charles?
Madam Chair, just a question for Ronnie. The thought crossed my mind when I was going through reading the report about how these road projects impact the water systems and how much responsibility does the DOT take for impacting the water systems versus why the entity that provides the water is also required to participate in the project.
I know that Rick, the last time I talked to Rick, they were still working out the agreement and the arrangements as far as cost goes. But I suppose just because it's their pipeline, they have to do something with it. So they are going to move it.
So
You'd have to
they're
talk to Rick
getting
about that.
they're getting value out of this by improving their system, I suppose.
I don't know how much actual value they're getting out of it, except that when they go, if they ever have leaks or any kind of maintenance, it'll be much easier to, it'll be much more accessible to, so it does benefit them in the long run, but I don't know if they see a direct benefit right now, except.
Thank you.
Sounds like Tom might have a little bit to add.
Yeah, just based on the 2000 West project, UDOT will pay for their direct impact on the system, but it's mainly the D&W wanting to move the pipeline away from the middle of the road. So in future cases, if they have to do any maintenance, instead of cutting through a concrete roadway, they just have to they can access the pipeline at the edge of the road. So that's, yes, UDOT pays for some of the project where their impact is direct, but it's mainly the Davis Weber because of, they're wanting to move the pipeline to the edge of the road. So, if that makes sense.
I appreciate the explanations from both of you. Thanks.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Okay, well, we'll assume Kyle, you'll make that motion.
Yes,
All
thank you.
right. And then I assume Rick Smith will be here. Is that okay? All right. Thank you. All right. Then we've got a couple of committal of funds. It looks like the first one is RE 478 Wellsville-Mendon Conservancy District, and that is in Charles area. Charles, do you want to set this up before we go to Tom? Or anything to set this up with, I guess, before we go to Tom?
Well, I think Tom's been involved with it way more than I have, but there was quite a bit of discussion about the payback period. And I think Tom's worked closely with Zions to get things straightened around there. Tom can explain it better than I can.
All right. Thank you, Tom.
So the project is basically them piping the remaining 3 miles of their upper canal and putting in a pump station to pressurize that pipeline. And if you look at the board amount, the board last May authorized almost 1.4 million. That amount has not changed, but you notice that the cost estimate has changed, and there's now a Water Smart grant involved. But I think the main thing that impacted the repayment is, if you look at it, it was 15 years payback before, now it's 27 years. Okay. But the main impact is the Zions Bank analysis. We had them look at how they did things, and before they just based their benefit on 1 year's worth of crop prices. And so we had them go back and do a weighted average over 4 or 5 years. So, because we know that how variable the the price is on crops. And also, they didn't take into consideration previously that there is a cost to producing more crops. So we had them take 25% out of the value that was based on the, their evaluated crop price. Took 25% out as a production cost. So that lowers the net benefit, and that's what we base our repayment on. Any questions about that?
Any questions of the board on that one? Okay. The repayment period's a good clip longer than we initially looked at, but
Right.
I feel like you've done a good job of explaining why, which is helpful. Just for my benefit, when Zions is doing the analysis, are they doing that on our behalf or on behalf of the applicant? Does that?
It's on our
Okay.
behalf.
Yeah, and see, that's helpful too to know, to validate that, again, they're looking out
in
for.
the application, the applicant estimates their increased crop yield, and we go with that estimate. And the crop value of the crop, the current selling price over the last 5 years or so, and they use that to determine their net value, and we use that number to come up with the repayment.
Great. Right.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So since it's based on crop production, what happens if during the period somebody develops that property? Do they have to pay that off, their portion? Or do they get to go on to position the crop there instead of development?
Mm-hmm.
Our contract is our contract, so they have to keep making the payments, and it's up to them how they want to assess to come up with that price or that amount.
Shalane's going to come up. Yeah.
I just wanted to note that the purchase agreement that we enter into with these companies has a clause in it that says, if the water use is changed from irrigation to municipal or hydropower or anything else that's higher cost water, that our contract may be renegotiated for more favorable terms for the board.
Okay, that's great. That's great.
Never done that.
I don't know that we ever have.
Yeah, that's good. Obviously this is on the record in the briefing meeting, but I wonder, would you be open to asking that question again in the formal meeting, and we can put Shalane's comments on the record again in the formal meeting? Yeah, I think that's helpful. Thank you. Thanks, Tom. All right, any other questions, comments? All right, thanks, Tom. I assume, Charles, you'll be willing to make that motion?
Yes, Madam Chair, I will.
right.
Thank you.
And just so you know, Madam Chair, we will have a number of folks
Okay.
online. John Hardman, Curtis Ma, Kurt Henley, and Ben Sandberg, and Chad Brown. This is what's on the list.
Okay.
That's 3 other board members and 2 other engineers.
Okay, great.
And I have this listed here.
Awesome.
too,
Okay,
so-
thank you. Well, I'll make a note that they'll be here, and then I'll make sure to work with you, Candace, too.
They'll be online.
Okay, sorry, be here virtually. That's great. Remind me, I've asked this every time. On the committal funds, I mean, of course, we'll give them the opportunity to share whatever they'd like to share, but just remind me, they're not required to participate on committal funds. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, moving on to RE 481, the Peterson Pipeline Association. This one is in Kyle's area. And as Brad's coming up, Kyle, is there anything you'd like to share before we hear from Brad?
I haven't been directly involved in this one, but it's, I think, pretty straightforward. So I'll just let Brad go ahead and introduce it.
Thank you.
Sure, yeah. So to recap, they're drilling an additional water source to be in compliance with drinking water. And an update on the project is they are currently drilling, or they just drilled, and they hit a clay layer at their target depth. So they had to drill a little further, and they did hit water. And so their plan is now to install the perforated pipe and measure the output within a week.
Okay, wow.
So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Any questions about this? It sounds like they're
they're doing good.
really
yeah.
ready to go. Okay, excellent. let's see. I assume they'll be participating virtually, or they're close.
They,
if-
as you mentioned, they're
Yeah.
not required
Okay.
to participate, so, and we don't have
Okay.
them
Correct,
listed as attending.
Okay, great.
No, we are, just a note, we are not funding the well. We are just funding the pipe that will connect to the well and the well house.
Okay. All right. There's no other question. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
The only thing I just wanted to bring up was just, I guess, the concern about the validity of the well and the timing. If we're going to be committing funds for the pipe and then the well doesn't turn out to perform real well, because if there's a clay layer, down very near the bottom of the well, there very well might not be a high output there of water. So I just bring that up, I guess, as a concern. I would assume that they're going to test pump before they start putting in pipe, but just wanted to bring that up. So
Yes, and I think that is why we did not fund the well per se, and we're just funding. So they hold the risk of that.
Okay. All right. Kyle, you'll make the motion on that one?
Yes, I will. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes, go ahead, please.
if I could just a little bit on, though we're not funding this well, when we are asked to fund a well, we require a test well, and we do not reimburse for the test well unless it becomes the production well, because we don't want to pay for holes getting poked. And so in that case, when we do fund a well, but I understand the concern, what happens if that ends up not being the well? Brad, when are they actually starting construction on the pipeline? Or is it
I don't know the exact date, but it's within 2 months.
Okay. All right. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Marisa. Okay, got a couple of special items. RC 067 Twin Creeks Special Service District. This one's in your area, Mike. Is there anything you want to share before Ethan presents?
The only thing I'd share is this is something that's been ongoing for almost 30 years. We've had problems at the time from the outlet, the dam, the pipe outlet, and then some structural issues arose because of that. And so this is a long time overdue project, so we're excited to get it done.
Awesome. Madam Chair, members of the board, thank you. Twin Creeks Special Service District. This one's pretty straightforward. We committed dam safety funds for this already in May. And so they just need a little bit extra to get them over the top. They're making great progress. I've been up there 3 times, I think. And so, they've got a great team working on it up there. But they're just looking, we initially had committed $1,840,000, which was 80% of 2.3 million. And so now that's getting bumped up, and we're seeking an additional 352,000 in dam safety funds to get that over the top and finished up. And there were a few minor modifications during construction and a little bit higher bid price. And then we added some contingency on our end to make sure we were good to get there. And so, yeah, any questions?
Doesn't look like we have any questions. Thank you, Ethan.
Thanks.
Mike, I assume you'll be making that motion. Great. All right, RE486 is the Sterling Irrigation Company. This one's in your area, Blaine. Russell's coming up. Do you want to set this one up for us?
Yes, we kind of set it up our last board meeting. This is the one that we talked about where they had some different grant money available from Conservancy
That's right,
District,
okay.
and they were trying to make things match and kind of on some time deadlines. And they have to start construction by, I believe it was November of this year. It was this in order to qualify for things and all that. So anyway, Russell and Ethan and I went down and met with Travis Otten, the president of the company, and then the secretary was online and their engineer was there. We took a tour of the system. This is replacing 4,300 feet of old asbestos pipe, and it's in my mind, a legitimate, valid project. And I appreciate Ethan and Russell's help on getting this one teed up so that it's possible. Because originally, last board meeting, it didn't look like it might be possible to get it done. So thank you, Russell and Ethan.
Great, thank you.
No problem. Yeah, they're gonna replace an old transite asbestos cement pipe with just modern HDPE pipe. They're gonna upgrade the size of it from what was put in the 70s so that they can capture a little bit more of their spring flows. And the reason they undersized it so much in 1977 was just to save money. So they didn't have to put in much bigger pipe just to catch a little bit of, to catch some extra spring high flows. It's less than a mile of pipe on this first phase. And then there will be a second phase that they're going to install about another mile of pipe. And they got a grant to pay for about 3/4 of this project. And the rest of it, they're asking for 85% funding from the board. Benefits are pretty minimal, just because it's mostly talking about a little bit of extra spring flow. It isn't really going to save too much in operation and maintenance costs. So it's recommended to fund it out of the revolving construction fund at 0% interest for $250,000 over 25 years with annual payments at $10,000 a year. And they are very happy with that.
And any questions on this one? Great. Thank you, Russell and Blaine. I assume you'll make the motion.
Thank you.
Great. Okay. And then finally, RE489, West Panguitch Irrigation Reservoir Company. This is in your area, Spencer, and Tom's presenting. Anything you'd like to share before Tom gives us the details?
Yeah, this is very much of a needed project. I don't know if any of you saw on the news, it hit all of the statewide news for some period of time. The dam was built actually about the same time my family showed up, about 40 miles to the west in a totally different basin in the 1870s. And the dam, when you look at the original construction, there's been some alterations. It's quite a substantial dam, and quite frankly surprised that it's held up as well as it has, knowing the type of construction that was used on it. So I think this is a very well worth project to pursue.
Great, thank you.
Like Spencer indicated, it's the existing Panguitch Lake. Have too many dams floating through my head.
Yeah.
Was constructed in the 1870s. It was a rock masonry dam, and I'll have in the board presentation, I'll have pictures. You can visualize what it looks like. And it has had some improvements. A concrete cap was placed on the top in the 1940s. The board provided some funding for improvements in the 1970s, where they put in some material downstream to bolster the dam, and then shotcreted over that so they could use it as the spillway, so it would be durable. But in last winter, when the dam was nearly full, of course the top freezes over, the water surface freezes over, and that ice was pushing against the dam. It cracked the rock masonry structure. There were portions of that were tipping, and so that was a very big concern. And they actually gave notice to the residents in Panguitch to be ready to leave at a moment's notice in case it failed. And they did some emergency measures to remedy the situation. They trenched some or cut some slots in the ice to relieve the pressure. They lowered the reservoir, the water level, as fast as they could without causing flooding downstream. And luckily that emergency situation was relieved. So and at that time they started doing some investigations there, engineering, drilling in the structure, and to see what could be done, and they came up with several options. And the one that seemed to make most sense to them would be to just completely abandon that old structure and build a new one just downstream. So that is the project that's going to be before you today. We're going to be asking for authorization and committal of funds, just so the funding will be available. They still would like to have the work done, at least starting this winter, even though construction at 8,200 foot elevation is kind of iffy during the winter, but they say that there's some things they can get done at least so they could get the work up, and they can still operate the old dam for the next season and finish the project when the weather warms up and they can get back to it. So that is a big if, though. There are a lot of things that need to be done. There's still need to finish the plans and specs, which the Division of Water Rights Dam Safety Section, they need to review and approve of all the plans and specs. They haven't received any plans and specs yet. The engineer says that they should have it to them by the 1st of November. So it is going to take time, and the dam is located on Forest Service. And when you get the feds involved, that can drag things out. They're building they're proposing the new one just downstream, so it would still fall within the existing federal easement that they have for the existing dam. But they still need to go through a NEPA confirmation process just to make sure everything's taken care of. They need to get a state stream alteration permit and also a federal 404 permit from the Army Corps of Engineers, which is the federal version of a stream alteration permit. So there is paperwork that needs to be done. So even though the board will be acting on authorizing and committing funds today, just be assured that the funding agreement will not be signed until all the requirements are taken care of. So all the permits, approval from dam safety, so that we're going to require them to do that before we'll actually sign the agreement. So. And Blaine brought up another issue about water rights, and it's being proposed that the elevation of the new structure be the same as the old one, which will keep it so the water surface elevation doesn't increase. You're not flooding cabins. It doesn't decrease. You have a big bathtub ring around there, but we will make sure that whatever they do, wherever they set that final crest elevation, will abide by all the water right agreements and determinations that have been passed. So. Any questions? Oh, maybe I should say the funding. It's a $5 million project. We're providing 85% per normal. They've already indicated that they can't come up with their local cost share, but we've been assured by other people that will be covered, other people being legislators. And we are hearing that funding for the project will ultimately be provided by the state. And so this will end up being a short-term kind of a bridge loan until that funding comes in place. So they're hoping that they get everything paid for by the state. And so in our case, we're hoping that this loan will be paid off within a few months after, just depending on where they get the funding from. This it'll be decided in the upcoming legislative session, but whether it's coming from this fiscal year or the next one has yet to be determined. If it's this year, they could pay it off sooner. If not, they'll have to wait until after July to come up with that.
So, Tom, so the loan will be let with a 30-year time frame, but you're saying that if legislative appropriations are provided for the full amount, that will just be paid off as soon as those legislative appropriations are
right.
met. Okay.
But we have to have something in place just in case that doesn't happen. Okay. And In other cases where we've funded new dams, we've extended that repayment period out even further, 40, 50 years. So if that doesn't happen, if they don't get any federal money, I'm sure they'll be back for an amendment to their loan to extend that year out, the term out. So.
Thank you. Questions?
Yeah, I have a question. So you mentioned the water rights. Obviously, maintaining the same water level and moving the dam downstream increases the water within the reservoir. I just want to make sure that because we're helping fund this, that there's no liability to any downstream water users that may be harmed in that case. And I understand, but you didn't mention that water rights was part of the sign off, but I assume they probably are.
Yeah, Division of Water Rights, the dam safety section will have to approve everything, but we will make sure that all of the other water rights are taken care of. So there's no increase in storage that exceeds their water right. And apparently there's been some Utah Supreme Court rulings on the issue that they can't increase the storage or the surface area. The new one will be 50 feet downstream from the other one. So whatever happens, there won't be much of an impact. But if they need to drop the crest elevation of the new one a few inches just to balance everything out, so there's no increase in storage, then that will have to happen.
Okay, thank you.
Your questions? Yeah.
I was just going to bring up, Tom had mentioned that. I know it's kind of hard to tell here from the packet here of this drawing, but yeah, it's where the green starts right there. I've been there several times, probably every year, drive over that dam, even though it's in a different county and I don't own any property in that county or have any benefit there. But that green starting, yeah, it's probably from here to those cameras out there, or those monoculars just out there on the front porch below.
It's pretty close.
One question, Tom, as far as with this dam, do you know what they're planning on doing with the existing dam? Are they planning on like tearing it completely out? And then, because that was brought up by Mike as far as the additional storage area. And I know Teresa's office is going to watch closely, to make sure it's not an enlargement of the right, but I was just curious on that, because again, I'm not a hydrologist, I'm not a structural engineer by any means, but just if that dam did completely fell, that could give quite a instantaneous, immediate pressure on that new dam, something like that. So.
It's my understanding that the dam owners would prefer to leave the old structure in place, and there's advantages to that. I mean, that's an immediate cofferdam, which keeps the water away from the new construction site. And also it would be a barrier for future ice flows to keep it away from the new structure.
Okay.
But the Division of Water Rights Dam Safety Section have expressed some concerns. A lot of it has to do with what you just mentioned. You have that existing structure there. Over the years, it will break down, and where's that material going to go? It's going to go 50 feet downstream and be against the new structure. And it may not be a matter of the instantaneous failure. I don't think that would happen, but it's just a vengeful buildup of material against the other one, which should be able to structurally hold that. But the fear is that it may block the outlet in the new one. So that's an issue that's going to have to be worked out.
Okay.
I'm sure water rights will take that into consideration before they approve the new plans and specs for the proposed structures.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions, comments? All right. I'll just ask this one. So I'm glad that you've noted that, we won't enter into a purchase agreement until all requirements are met. Just because this one's relatively high profile, will y'all just send us some sort of notification?
When it's
I mean,
taken care of.
whoever's
Okay.
chair at the time will sign off, but just so the full board knows when it's actually finalized and executed, I think that'd be helpful.
Mhm.
Thank
Do
you.
that.
All right. And Spencer, I assume you'll make the motion on that one? Great. Okay, it looks like we've got 2 new applications, RE487, RE490. We don't have to do anything with those. We'll plan to hear details on them at a later date. And then Jonathan Jennings will be at our meeting and he'll provide an update on cloud seeding. It looks like, and by the way, Shalane made me amazing notes that I'm reading from, which I truly appreciate it. It looks like we'll need to adopt our 2025 meeting schedule, so we will need a formal motion on that. I think we had the dates in our last materials. Does that sound right? So hopefully everyone's reviewed those and.
Yeah, we did share them
That's right.
out. So if it is,
Great.
yeah, so.
So maybe, why don't we just take one quick final look at those and, oh yeah, where are they? Let's see. If anyone has any concerns, we can bring them up now or we can try to manage them later. Let's see, where are they there? Oh, they're at they're between the clouds, so it's after the cloud seeding report.
Before the minutes.
Mhm.
June 26th is, I have a conflict. That's my family reunion for all week.
I think we had that same conflict this year.
Should just go to the reunion.
I'm actually, reunion sounds kind of fun, actually. Yeah, we should, yeah, I was gonna say, yeah.
That's kind of fun. Sounds kind of fun.
Tots down there. I wait down that country, see Greg's country. So come down.
I was gonna say, I mean, if you're putting it out there, you might have some of us show up. I think if Blaine, if it's okay, though, I think maybe we can manage that as we get closer to the date. If it feels like there's more of a critical mass, having a challenge with the date, we could move it. Does that sound okay? But I'm so impressed that y'all have your calendars, have things on your calendars that far out. I have no idea. I know if we keep this date, I know on June 26th I'll be at a board meeting maybe. Are there any other conflicts that are
Madam
that we'll want
Chair,
to note?
I'll be back east on March 19th for a different board meeting.
Okay.
So I won't be able to be there that day.
Okay. And that one's during the water users conference. That one. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
again, we can, as always, we can kind of, as we get close, if there's some critical mass around any of these that we do need to move, then we could look to doing that, but good to note it. And of course, we'll provide a virtual option for all of these as well, thanks to stellar AV team. Go ahead. Go ahead, David.
The
Yeah.
election stuff
Oh.
is still TBD, so
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But usually I can participate virtually if
We appreciate that.
that's a thing, and I can make the motion too.
Great, thank you. All right, Dana will make the motion on this. Thank you. All right. And Candace is going to present information to the board now.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Maybe first up, we'll have Shalane come up and give an update on status of funds.
I'll just say, hey, there's a brand new, this is here. Heads up at a future meeting. Okay. There's two.
And I'll get a little comfortable because it's a little different than last time. I've found some things, and so you might notice some differences. So I think it seems we've been kind of rushed the last couple meetings in going through status of funds. So I just want to take a little bit more time today, not a lot, but you'll see on the front page, the balance of the regular revolving construction fund. I had to pull out the August report just to see just how different. And in August, the bottom balance showed about 8.6 million, and now we're looking at 16. And I'll just note that it looks like as I was updating over the change of fiscal years, I had incorporated some contracted but not spent that were actually dam safety funds and not regular revolving funds, so that there's a lot more available in the revolving fund. Now, 16 million compared to some of the others still isn't huge, but this is the fund that's for smaller project. It doesn't grow as fast because, you know, we don't charge interest in the revolving fund, but it is making interest. The account is actually earning some interest, while interest rates have been higher, that we've kind of benefited there. But so there are funds available there for the smaller projects. On to the next page, dam safety is actually quite similar. I did make some adjustments there as I went through the dam safety funding and saw, and today, actually, with the additional dam safety funds being requested, that also has an effect on the balance that's available. And while I put that balance available there, unlike with the other funds, it's not one you really have to worry about, because Tom and Ethan and Ben are the ones out there getting those dam safety projects rolling. So even though it isn't officially committed, authorized even, we have a lot that's in the works. In fact, you may notice, and I don't know how many of you pay this close attention, but there are a couple of projects on this committed list that you actually haven't seen. The Huntington Cleveland Irrigation Company and Red Creek Irrigation Company are two dams that, those are the projects we initiate engineering contracts, so they can go out and start the process of compiling the studies, figuring out where the deficiencies are, and we don't bring them to you until they have a design cost estimate. And then we ask you to commit funding. The board years ago said, we don't need to see this over and over for this. Whatever the engineering is, just go ahead and enter into a contract for that. So I have listed those as committed because there are contracts in the work for the engineering fees for those two projects. So that's the big difference from August there.
Madam Chair, a question, just explanation for the length of time on the Washington County flood projects.
Yes, those are interesting because what those are is their NRCS. So the NRCS is paying the bulk of the funding. So the board share, instead of 80%, is 35% grant instead of the 80 that you would normally offer. And that means we're kind of at the whim of when NRCS actually pursues those. But I'm joined by Tom here. He must have something to add.
Always, sorry. But those particular three, the Gypsum Wash, Warner Draw, and Stookie, Gypsum Wash actually went under construction to put in new tow drains, and while they were doing that construction, they found cracks in the embankment. And so they decided to test the other two to see if they had cracks also, and Stookie did. Warner Draw didn't, not so much. So part of the reason that these have taken so long, other than the NRCS is doing the design in-house and that drags things out, but it's to come up with a solution for that cracking problem. So they keep assuring me that they're going to be ready to go soon, but we'll see.
Maybe, and maybe you've answered this implicitly, but this is just that not my area of expertise. But so these amounts, 212 and 88.4, knowing what's happened. And again, maybe you've answered this already in your comments, and I haven't, but like
these amounts have actually been committed by the board years ago.
Yes.
But yeah, those will probably change.
And you probably don't see it, but every quarter I put out a spending projection on the dam safety projects, and if you had access to that, you would notice that those particular projects, the costs, they're not the 212,000, they're 2 million, 1.5 million.
Okay,
'cause
that's
we
yeah,
kind of-
just magnitude's helpful. That's okay.
So in our projection, in our planning, we have anticipated higher costs for those. And when they're actually ready to go to construction, we'll come back for the board for an amendment to those. I guess amendment to one, we haven't contracted the others, but a change to the amount in the others. So they'll be taken into account there.
Great, thank you. Other questions, comments? Good. Okay, yeah.
It's legislative money related. Do you want me to hold it or do you want me to? Okay. When you guys were saying that the legislature was going to fund the Panguitch Dam project, is that going to come through the dam safety grant or it's going to be a totally thing on
No.
it of itself?
Yeah, it's not, that dam was not deemed to be deficient of minimum standards, so it doesn't qualify for dam safety funding. And so dam safety funding is specifically set aside to upgrade dams to meet minimum standards, and especially where they've decided to construct a new dam, that will
Okay.
not be funded through a dam safety grant. So no, it would, if the legislature approves funding, that probably wouldn't even come through the board, except that you'll get it to pay off your funding you provide if you choose to provide today. So.
And then part B of that question was, there's a lot of talk about dam safety these days. Do you feel like, Candace, I guess this is a question for you, but do you feel like there's renewed excitement in the legislature about putting more money in that?
It's a great question, Dana. Thank you. And Madam Chair, if I may. Yes, I think there is a lot of interest regarding dam safety and concerns. That it's been in the media. We provided and we also provided a building block for additional dam safety funds. Again, I feel like we do it I don't feel like we do it every year. Trying to get additional funds for this program. We have in the past 10-ish years received one-time funding in chunks that has been helpful to address some of the issues and kind of get us there, but we still have a long road to go. The only concern I have is even with the renewed interest, there's just, based on some of the projections I'm hearing, less money to appropriate this year. So it will likely be competitive with other needs for the state.
Thank you for those questions, that answer. All right, more?
Okay, yes, I do have more. Before I move on though, Tom actually brought up a good point, and because you only see in the status of funds what's authorized or committed, his projections, I'm just wondering if you all would be interested in those, seeing that spreadsheet when he updates that. You don't want it shared out, but it's not official, Tom. It's
I
just
wonder
your
what the right-
projections.
I was going to say, I think it might be helpful. I don't know, whatever the right way to share it is, because I was just about to say, well, maybe we should put it here, note here, but given that they're really just projections, perhaps this is not the right venue for that. But
And that's
if
what
there's
I was
somewhere
thinking.
where you could
Just
do an update to us, maybe once a year or quarterly, that might be just helpful.
okay. I think we could do that. And that way you'd at least know what we think is on the horizon and what's coming.
Yeah, I think that's helpful because again, like for me at least, and again, my colleagues have more information around this, but I know it's more, but I just the magnitude of how much more. It was helpful, Tom, when you threw those numbers out. Not that I'm going to hold you to them when they're not, but that magnitude is important to understand. And as we look at it, and we look at, to Dana's point, that maybe the need for this 14 million starts to look a little bit thin, maybe. If,
Oh yeah. Well,
we
no, and
understand the magnitude.
especially if you saw
thin.
Tom's projections, there's not 15 million available.
Yeah.
It's already called for.
Yes.
So
Thank you.
we just haven't contracted it yet. So
thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, on to the city's water loan fund. It actually didn't change much. The correction there was really just getting some more refined numbers as far as the finances from last year. And that was a lot of what the changes that happened here were. We're getting some more nailed down numbers from our finance manager and from the Division of Finance combined as far as repayments and interest on accounts and things like that. But the C&D fund, that's where, and it's funny because ultimately it didn't change all that much. I had told you last time we had a big balance available, even if everything were on the list was contracted. But it was very interesting because as I was going through the process of clarifying information I had and gathering information that I hadn't had, I also found a place where we hadn't been tracking some things very well. So I had just missed it. And it was a lot of the bond closings that we had happen over the year. And a lot of them were, of course, secondary meter loan portions were bonds. We didn't have those in our project tracking spreadsheet of actually having spent the money. But that ended up kind of being offset by a transfer into the C&D fund that was not accounted for. And I don't know how many of you remember, I think we've discussed it in Candace's director's report. The legislature has decided that they will take money from the WIRA account, which I don't even present to you because we don't use it. It's got certain uses that it can be used for, and until we start using it as a board, I don't think it's worth really talking about. So, but the legislature decided, oh, we should use some of those funds for Colorado River reuse projects. And last year, they took $45 million from the WIRA and transferred it to the C&D fund. So of this $178 million that shows it's available in the C&D fund, there's 45 that can't be used for regular C&D projects. It can only be used for those Colorado River reuse projects. So that brings me now to my question for the board. Do you want that treated similarly to the dam safety? Rather than showing that you've got 178 million in C&D fund available, do you want me to make another sheet that's C&D specifically Colorado River reuse? Would you like that separated out?
I think that would be helpful.
Yeah.
I agree.
Turn on your mics. Sorry, just make sure.
If you keep track of it and just remind us every once in a while how much is where, I don't care if you have to go through another formal process, but you should be aware
Yes,
of that.
absolutely. Well, and we've received no applications yet for it, which is part of the reason I didn't have it accounted for in here. I had kind of forgotten that it happened until I got that information from our finance manager, and I went, oh yeah, there's that in there now too that I wasn't accounting for.
I mean, if we're not spending it, personally, there's a rest of you guys, but why separate it out and present another fund that nothing's
well, and
happening?
it doesn't hurt to have another page that just shows 45 million available, because guess what? This coming year, we'll get another 50. So, Blaine would like to see it separated out. Anyone else?
I would like to see it separated out.
Okay.
please.
I agree.
I was just going to make a comment opposite of what they've said over there, is that it could be handled just by a footnote with saying 45 million of that total can only be used for Colorado River projects, but
So
however you
maybe
wanna-
until we get an application, maybe note that. I don't know.
Are we, so just to be clear, we have the authority over that 45 million?
Yes, you do.
Okay.
Yes, it will be handled like we handle all the C&D projects, they'll have to submit an application. It will have to come to the board for authorization, complete all their legal requirements, then come back. But the difference is it's similar to dam safety, that it is can only be used for this.
Can I try a suggestion that kind of combines what some of the sentiment we're hearing, maybe leans one way, and you all can let us know if this is feasible or not. I mean, this is in many cases the only public document that's really out there. I know that like if anyone wanted this information, generally they could get to it in some way, but
Sure.
this is always in the board materials, the folders every month. And so for that reason, I do think figuring out a way to separate it out is just from a like public information standpoint. I would prefer that.
Okay.
Whether or not it's a separate page or some sort of footnote, but I think if it's a footnote, it needs to be maybe a little bit
bigger, bolder.
Yeah. So I don't know. So maybe it's just easier to treat it like the dam safety, but unless there's any reason to not separate it out, it feels like, again, I think I've mentioned this a couple of times in these meetings over the years, but I used to be a fiscal analyst and a governor's analyst, and I would see these numbers get quite large, and my budget director would see these numbers get quite large, and then try to go after them.
There's a pot of money we can go after.
Yeah. And so as much as we can make sure that those are identified or spoken for, I think that's helpful.
Yeah, based on the conversation, I changed my comment about the fact that I think it should be separated out, and so that there's that further explanation and committal.
Yeah, that's what I'm concerned about, is that somebody that really doesn't understand the system and understand things thinks there's money there that they could go to the legislature and say, look, all this money these guys have, you pay taxes, move this money somewhere else, type of thing. And so that's where I'm coming from.
Thank you. Spencer?
It's neat to hear you all say this, because that's exactly what I was going to say. It's just, I don't know how the process works with the legislators and with Candace, looking at the numbers, but I think that the report needs to show that earmark for Colorado River, because, that Colorado River, when it comes, it's going to be really critical that we have those funds and that we're building up those funds. So I think whatever we need to do so that it's clear, like our chairman said, that it doesn't get whittled down because of the way it's reported. So
Thank you.
Okay, I am happy to do that. Yep. Yeah.
Thank you. I know one more thing for the team to have to track for us, because I know that you have this all, but I do think, given the importance of the issue,
and it's no
it.
problem.
Thank you.
That was one thing I realized and thought, okay, we probably ought to separate it out, but I'll check with the board. I didn't want to just do that, just be presumptuous. But
Thank you. Thank you.
So there are, though, even subtracting that 45 million from that 178, there's still $130 million that we can spend on conservation and development projects. And I think there's a great need out there. As we've had a lot of conversations, and think Candace is going to address it later, things happening with HB 280 and some of that. One of the things I've really realized is why our balances get so big is because we have so few grant funds. We have dam safety grant funds and very rarely bond insurance grants that we might offer to somebody. But I feel like ours grows because other than that, we don't grant funds like drinking water does, like water quality does. They have hardship grants. They call it principal forgiveness, which kind of makes me laugh because they can't use the term grant for certain things. But so I think they come to us last, and only if they have to, because they don't want to have to repay money, especially with interest, unless it's absolutely required. So, but I do think as people move past the secondary meter projects, just as you see today, there are several regular projects gearing up and coming back to you for funding. And I think we're going to start to see more of those. So hopefully these won't continue to grow out of control. But if you know of projects that need funding, I mean, especially if they're agriculture projects, they can get funding from the C&D for 1%, which is still a really good rate. So,
Shalene, remind me, and I feel bad this is not all committed to memory. So some of the criteria within this account or with this specific fund are statutory.
mhm.
You mentioned the 1%. Is that statutory or is that by board
No,
rule?
that's board guidelines.
So where I'm going with this, and this is probably a discussion for another time, but I mean, I think it would be maybe interesting to take some time to think through if there's anything we can do with our guidelines or our rules to make, I don't know if better use of this is the right word, but to
Mhm.
make broader use of this fund.
Okay.
Again, I understanding that there's statutory things that we
Yes.
can't move, but where there's things that we have authority over, if we have these funds available and they could be put to use, if there's ways that we can, modify rules, perhaps we should look at that. And again, conversation for another time and potentially an
But that is a
introduction to.
great point to bring up, Juliet, because for those who can stick around after the board meeting today, we will have a work group. And that's what I'm looking at this as, is a brainstorm session, not just conservation issues, but are there other things that the board needs to reconsider? It's been several years since we've made changes to the guidelines, the rules, and even just direction to staff that should we be considering other things. So yes, be ruminating on those issues and we'll talk about that later. And then I'll solicit additional suggestions via email that we can then address at a later board meeting.
Great.
So I appreciate that thought.
Thank you. Other questions on C&D comments? Great.
Okay, so moving on, we're now to the secondary meter grants. The small system actually didn't change. Woohoo, one I actually had got right, I think, over the change of fiscal years. The ARPA, of course, looks different because we had a meeting in September where we reallocated all those ARPA funds that had come back. So you're back to having zero available in the ARPA grant funds. They are split up a little differently because there is some for 3 more water conservation projects, but you all know that because you voted on all of those during that September meeting. And then you can see a couple of additional new projects coming. I will note with the additional meeting in September, we didn't get some of those withdrawals taken care of that have been sitting out there for a while, but they are on our to-do list. So some of those future funding needs, that number 14 there at the bottom is one that's been out there for a while. Canal and Reservoir Company. We will get on those and see, can we go ahead and withdraw this? Because if you need this funding, you're going to have to come back with a new application, an updated cost estimate and plan. So while we didn't have a chance to get to that between August and October, we will work on that before December. So the status of funds is hopefully accurate now. Are there any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you for that very thorough briefing. And you're right, it's been a while, so appreciate you going through page by page with us.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Shalene. We do have just a couple other items. We wanted to have Sarah Schechter give an update on the Great Salt Lake litigation and where that's at. Welcome, Sarah.
Is that better? Yeah. Okay, thank you, everybody. I'm glad to be here and see you all in person. I will give you an update on the Great Salt Lake litigation, and I'll also update you on Waterhorse, where we are with that. Just as a reminder, I actually represent the Division of Water Rights in the Utah physician's case as well as Waterhorse. But there's not a conflict of interest. We are the two agencies are totally aligned, so there's no problem there. Where we are with Utah physicians, on September 17th, we had oral argument before the district court judge. The oral argument lasted about 6 or 7 hours. It was a really long day. The judge was very, very active, had a lot of questions from the very beginning. One of the things she seemed to very much focus on was, okay, so if navigability is what defines the public trust, how come water isn't part of the public trust? That was the question she asked us. We spent a lot of time talking through that. She also had some hard questions for the interveners, which was an interesting discussion. And she has asked the parties to give additional briefing. The plaintiffs will file some additional briefing on October, I believe the 20th or 21st. Then we defendants have briefing that we will submit on November 15th with answering some of the questions that she left us with. And then each of the parties will have an opportunity to respond in kind. Hopefully all that additional briefing will be wrapped up before Christmas. And hopefully we can get a decision, although we may end up with another oral argument. We are not sure at this time. So that's in progress. Any questions on that litigation?
I just had a question. Is the judge, is she a water judge or is she just a regular district judge?
She is. So the courts have instituted this new water judge program, and Judge Scott, who is overseeing the case, is one of the water judges. She is also the judge who is on the Utah Lake and Jordan River adjudication. So she is familiar, especially with the adjudication part of water rights. And so she's engaged on these water issues. Okay, and then just another brief update on the Waterhorse case. The case is before the Supreme Court on appeal. Waterhorse has filed their opening appellate brief. Our brief is due next week. The AG's office, the Civil Appellate Division is actually handling the briefing and not the Natural Resources Division. Aaron Middleton is the attorney who is leading the briefing on that matter. And so we will be filing next week or on the 18th. I guess that is next week. Time flies. And then the Waterhorse will have a chance to file a reply brief, and then it will be submitted to the Supreme Court for their decision. Although there will be an oral argument, no doubt, on that one.
Doesn't seem like there's any questions. All right. Well, thank you for your update. We appreciate it, and thanks for your
You're welcome.
expert representation.
And I just want to say how
Yeah.
excited I am to be
Yeah.
representing all of you and the
We're very
division. So
excited.
thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. So I'm just wanted to give you an update on all the work that's been going on regarding HB 280. And I do plan to cover this in our in the director's report at the board meeting, but there is a lot going on. And one of the biggest we have two big things that we've been working on. One is with the Water Development Coordinating Council, which I chair, and my co-chair is John Mackey from the Division of Water Quality. We have been actively working, and all of our staff through the summer on a existing fund study that's required of HB 280 to have completed by the end of this month. We've done a significant amount of work documenting all of our different funds, what they're used for, how hard we are supposed to look at the can the fund be consolidated or not? Should it be part of the prioritization and planning process? And I think one of the trickiest things, maybe not just for me, but I felt it was really tricky, is how does this new process, this unified water infrastructure plan and this new fund, the water infrastructure fund that was created with HB 280, how does that work with the existing boards? So I'm really grateful to all the staff that put in time over the summer. And I feel like, and it was really helped drawn out by Ken Hoffman with the Division of Water Quality, excuse me. And he kind of went through a process and created a flow chart and under which trying to understand how would that look. And it would have some implications for the board and your funding process. There is discussions about what of your funds could be consolidated or not. Most of them, it was a or not for good reason. We did leave the opportunity that this board on an annual basis could make a decision of if there were additional needs that were identified through this Unified Water Infrastructure Fund or plan process, that you could transfer funds from your funds to the Water Infrastructure Fund if you deemed that necessary, kind of looking at the big state picture while still having authority over your funds. There was some discussion on proposal of having a yearly application process. The Board of Water Resources has historically we're always open for applications, right? There can be submitted, and depending on when the board's meeting they have to be submitted by a certain date. And that process could still continue with some of the other funding. But from a big picture, if we could have all of the funds put together, all the applications put together in one application period, and then through the Water Development Coordinating Council, we would be able to say, okay, this is a Board of Water Resources application, this is a Drinking Water Board application, water quality, and we can kind of separate them out, and then those would go to those funding boards. So we have, and that's just kind of a high level overview. We have this study, a draft of it that will be coming out next Tuesday. My team is working furiously to get it all finalized and laid out and branded and all the things to make sure it's going to come out and represent us well. And I would love your guys' review and feedback. Our goal was to, I should probably mention, we had several kind of, what did we call them? Just totally spaced it. Maybe I don't have it in here. Kind of principles that we were looking at as our kind of guiding principles. One is that the Water Infrastructure Fund, this new fund, should be revolving loan funds, with the exception of those collected by a fee, which is another study that we're in the process of undertaking, that we want to proactively plan for water infrastructure needs. We want to protect and provide funding for rural parts of the state. I think that's something that the Board of Water Resources has historically done a really good job of providing an opportunity for rural areas to receive funding. And so our concern is if we have some prioritized list, how will a rural ag project or even drinking water compare to some big municipal water project in a ranking and prioritization? So we've tried to account for that. We also want to be able to timely respond to emergencies and emergency situations, that they're not like, oh, well, you have to wait a year to apply. Want to maintain the flexibility for award, so those ready to proceed and not have it get tied up in some big prioritization process. We want to maintain good relationships and partners with our state financial institutions. And Joel is always great to remind me of, we need to keep this simple, because the more complexity we bring to it, the harder it will be. And then I would also add to that is maintain the board's authority over your funds to as much as possible. and your expertise, right? All of you spend your time and energies on these boards, and we want to make sure that that is still part of the process in general. So I'll probably maybe not go quite as detailed in that in the director's report. I will also say another new thing that our favorite bill of HB 280 has given us the opportunity to do is with the Water Development Coordinating Council to create a status of funds document for all the boards. So we are to get that out to the governor, the Legislative Management Committee, the Natural Resources, Ag and Environment Appropriations Committee. We sent out a draft. I sent out a draft on October 1st because that's that deadline. We are making some improvements to that. We had some additional information provided by one of the boards that we want to include, and then I'll send that out to you guys. But that's just kind of a big look of all the boards. And I am very much open to feedback on that report, especially where you guys have experience of looking at these things. If it's not clear, if it's confusing, there's a lot of information, a lot of numbers. And if you have recommendations on how better to present it, I would happily take those, because this was our first time of trying to conglomerate all these different boards in their status of funds. So yeah, lots of work going on with that. Kyle?
Question, if I understood you correctly, to say that throughout this process that you would, for example, the Board of Water Resources or the division would need to submit a list of applications for projects to be considered to be funded. And so if that's the case, how do you address a situation like a Panguitch Lake or a 1800 North interchange project that just comes up? How can you project that out 8, 10, months in advance?
Thank you, Board Member Stevens. I think that that is one of the tricky parts of this, right? When you have an annual application process. And so building in how to address, and how we framed it was regarding emergencies or unexpected projects. I think that is important, and I would welcome any feedback on that. I think there are, like the revolving construction fund, for example, is one that we said, well, that shouldn't be part of the prioritization and shouldn't be consolidated in any nature. That being said, has limited uses for that fund, right? At, up to $1 million and those type of things. So I think we probably need to refine that a little bit more in our process of how to address those issues. And then the other thing, we have this annual process and then this every 4-year process when we do this big unified water infrastructure plan, which I think will be helpful. But how do we create that space for those type of unexpected or emergency situations? So I would welcome your guys' thoughts on potentials to do that. And not necessarily that has to be resolved by October 31st. We do still have a pretty long runway, the ranking and prioritization of projects. So, and I kind of see this all kind of taking place at that time. Will begin July 1st of 2026. So we have a couple of years, and we will go through an official rulemaking process and all of those things. The goal this year is to provide some recommendations to the legislature on what we would need to change in our statutes for all of the different boards in order to kind of do this big picture thing, and then we can go through the rulemaking process. So there definitely probably is opportunities to write some rule that we take annual applications with the exception of, and build that in there. So I think that's a really good point. Okay, I think that's all I have, Madam Chair.
All right. Well, thank you for that. And of course, we'll look forward to the formal director's report. We did really well on time today. And I think, again, these briefing meetings. Yeah, I know. Thank you. Thank you. Normally, actually, I feel like we maybe push us to go a little bit longer than we should. But again, these briefing meetings are always so helpful. And I appreciate the fact that they're public and they're transparent. And I will make sure to remind everyone in our formal meeting or the actual meeting of the board that, the minutes of this meeting or the recording of this meeting will be available. That's all in me making the point that hopefully we can have a pretty efficient meeting, given that we had this excellent briefing meeting. So we do need a motion to adjourn if anyone's willing to make one.
So moved.
All right, second. All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Great, so we'll be back at 10:30. Nice.
There are some snacks.
Oh,